Welcome back to Have More Babies. Today, we're diving into something really important for so many families, managing pediatric asthma.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been looking at this guide, and it gives a pretty solid approach to, understanding it and living well with it.
It really is a widespread issue. It's kind of
Wow.
amazing, actually. The CDC figures from 2018 showed, what, over 6 million kids in the U.S. with asthma?
That's right. 6 million. And you see the impact. I mean, it's a leading reason kids miss school days, end up in the ER, even get hospitalized. It's significant.
It really is. Those numbers, they definitely paint a picture. But, and this is the hopeful part, right? With proper management, kids with asthma can lead totally active, healthy lives.
Absolutely. That's the key message. It's manageable.
And we're lucky to have our expert here to help us really unpack how families can do that effectively.
Happy to be here. Our goal today is really to pull out the key actionable stuff from this Omega Pediatrics guide. Stuff families can actually use to feel more confident managing their child's asthma day to day.
Okay, great. And hey, before we really jump in, we want to point you towards a fantastic resource for even more detailed information.
Yeah.
Yeah, for really comprehensive details, resources on managing pediatric asthma. Definitely check out omegapediatrics.com.
That's omegapediatrics.com. Good resource.
It is. And it's worth remembering, like you said, this isn't something parents do alone.
No way. Managing asthma effectively, it's a team effort. You need the healthcare providers, the child if they're old enough, and the caregivers, everyone working together.
Right, exactly. And the guide we looked at from Omega Pediatrics, it starts with something fundamental, just good, solid education.
Makes total sense. You got to understand what you're dealing with, right? If the family and the child too understands asthma, it just empowers them for that daily management.
So what kind of things are we talking about educating them on? What does the guide highlight?
Well, it covers quite a bit. Things like, what actually causes asthma, how to recognize the symptoms, which can vary,
Mm.
obviously, and crucially, the different treatments, especially the difference between those daily maintenance or controller meds and the quick relief rescue meds.
That distinction feels really vital. Maintenance versus rescue.
It is. One prevents problems long term, keeping airways healthy. The other is for immediate first aid when symptoms suddenly get worse. Knowing when to use which is critical.
And I imagine it's not just what they are, but how to use them.
Exactly. Proper inhaler technique is huge. It sounds simple, but lots of people don't quite get it right without coaching. Plus, understanding triggers what sets off the asthma and learning to spot those early warning signs before things get bad.
Okay. And knowing when it's serious enough for emergency care.
Right. That whole package of knowledge, it really empowers families to be proactive at home.
Yeah, I can see that. And the guide suggests providers should be sharing this info during visits.
Definitely. And maybe even referring families to asthma educators or, support groups. Getting that peer support can be really helpful too.
Okay, so education first. What's next? The guide talks about triggers, right? Identifying and avoiding them.
Yeah, that's a big one. Think of triggers as anything that can irritate the airways and make asthma symptoms flare up, potentially causing an attack.
So becoming a bit of a detective for your child?
Sort of, yeah. The guide lists some common culprits, things like catching a cold or the flu, being around tobacco smoke, even air pollution.
Okay, what about inside the house?
Oh, yeah. Indoor allergens are common triggers. Dust mites, pet dander, mold sometimes. Also, strong smells from cleaning products or perfumes, changes in weather.
Wow, quite a list.
It can be. Even exercise for some kids, or strong emotions like laughing hard or getting upset. The key thing the guide stresses working with the family to figure out that specific child's triggers, because it's not the same for everyone.
Right, personalize it.
Exactly. And then making practical changes like using allergen-proof covers on bedding, maybe keeping windows closed on high pollen days, or limiting hard outdoor play when air quality is poor. Little things can add up.
Makes sense. Okay, so education triggers. The next big piece has to be medication adherence, right? Getting kids to actually take the medicine.
Yes, and that can be a real challenge, especially as kids get older. They just want to be like their friends.
And maybe they feel fine, so they think, why bother?
Precisely. Which is why understanding that difference between the daily maintenance meds, the ones that control the underlying inflammation, and the rescue meds for quick relief is so, so important.
Right. One prevents, one treats acutely.
Exactly. And the guide really hammers home the importance of using the devices correctly, inhalers, spacers, nebulizers if needed. But the biggest message is taking those maintenance meds every single day.
even when symptoms aren't obvious?
Especially then. That's what prevents the flare-ups. It's about long-term control, not just reacting to symptoms. Consistency is really the name of the game.
How do providers help ensure that?
Well, the guide suggests having patients or caregivers actually show their inhaler technique during visits. You can catch errors that way.
Ah, the show me approach.
Yeah, and they even mention using tools like, mobile apps for reminders or tracking, anything that helps build that routine.
Using tech to help.
Mm.
Smart. Okay, moving on. Asthma action plans. This sounds like the roadmap for when things go wrong.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's basically a written plan, worked out with the doctor, that outlines exactly what to do when asthma symptoms start getting worse.
Okay, so what goes into one of these plans?
It should list the child's specific triggers, their usual symptoms so you know what to look for, all their medications with the correct doses, emergency contact numbers, clear instructions on when and how to use the rescue medication, and really importantly, the specific signs that mean, okay, we need emergency help now.
Having all that down in writing seems incredibly useful, especially in a stressful moment.
Absolutely. And the guide stresses keeping it updated, review it at least once a year with the doctor and sharing it. Share it with the school, babysitters, grandparents, anyone who cares for the child.
So everyone's on the same page.
Right. And they recommend reviewing it at every healthcare visit, too. Just a quick check to make sure it's still current and appropriate.
Good practice. Which leads nicely into the next point, involving schools and other caregivers. It really does take a village.
It truly does. You need that consistency of care across all the places a child spends their time. You can't just manage it at home.
So what does the guide recommend for bridging that gap?
Well, first off, get that asthma action plan to the school nurse and maybe key teachers. Make sure they actually understand it.
Not just file it away.
Exactly. Also, give caregivers a chance to ask questions. Maybe even practice using the inhaler or spacer if they'll be responsible for giving meds. Build their confidence.
That hands-on part seems important.
It is. And basic things like providing contact info, getting permission slips signed so the school nurse can talk to the doctor if needed.
The practical stuff.
Yeah. And educating school staff and caregivers about triggers, too, because triggers can exist at school or daycare just like at home. It's all about that teamwork, ensuring the child gets consistent, informed care everywhere.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, the guide also talks about tailoring things based on the child's age, right?
Yeah.
Because a toddler's experience is very different from a teenager's.
Hugely different. Asthma management really needs to adapt as kids grow and develop.
So how does it change? Let's start with the little ones, say under 5.
Okay, so with really young kids, maybe 0 to 5 years old, a big challenge is they often can't tell you clearly what's wrong. You rely more on observing signs, wheezing, coughing, faster breathing.
Right, you have to be the symptom detective again.
Exactly. Common triggers for them are often respiratory infections like colds, plus allergens, maybe tobacco smoke exposure. They might use a nebulizer machine more often than an inhaler. And obviously, the caregiver is doing all the medication administration.
Okay, what about when they get a bit older, like school-aged, maybe 6 to 11?
So now they're starting to gain some independence, which is good. But they also encounter new situations, new potential triggers through school, sports, friends' houses. Peer pressure can become a factor. Maybe they feel embarrassed using an inhaler. And you might start seeing some anxiety or feeling down related to having asthma. You need to be aware of those emotional aspects, too.
That's a really important layer. And then teenagers.
Teenagers, 12 to 17. The big driver often becomes wanting to be normal to fit in. This can unfortunately lead to skipping doses, not wanting to carry their inhaler.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
Plus, they might experiment with risky behaviors, like smoking or vaping, which is obviously terrible for asthma. So the guide emphasizes tailoring the approach, really listening to their concerns, leading with empathy to build trust and encourage them to manage their health responsibly.
That personalized, empathetic approach seems crucial right through, but especially then.
Absolutely. You have to meet them where they are.
Okay, so finally, the guide wraps up by really driving home why all this matters. Why is effective management so critical?
Well, the benefits are huge. When asthma is well managed, kids have fewer symptoms day to day. That means a better quality of life, obviously.
Right.
It also means less missed school, fewer scary ER visits, fewer hospital stays, which is better for the child, less stress for the family, and it actually lowers healthcare costs overall.
Those are really clear positives. What about the flip side? What happens with poor management?
The guides cite some pretty sobering stats, like 1.6 million ER visits for kids with asthma every year in the U.S.,
Wow.
over 200,000 hospitalizations yearly for pediatric asthma, and something like 14.4 million missed school days annually because of asthma. That's a massive impact.
It really puts it in perspective, millions of days lost.
It does. So the conclusion is clear. Proactive management, built on that partnership between the patient, family, caregivers, schools, and the healthcare team, leads to much better outcomes. Kids can thrive, not just cope.
And the guide mentioned Omega Pediatrics offers some virtual care options, too.
Yeah, they noted that some aspects of asthma care can be managed via telemedicine, which is convenient, but sometimes you still definitely need those in-person visits for things like checking lung function or demonstrating technique.
Right. So bringing it all together, the main takeaway seems to be that effective, consistent management is absolutely key for children with asthma to live their best lives.
Exactly that. And maybe one final thought for me, all these great strategies we talked about, they only work if they're actually put into practice consistently. And keeping that communication line open with your healthcare provider is essential. Don't hesitate to ask questions or raise concerns.
Excellent point. And again, we really want to encourage you, our listeners, if you're seeking more in-depth resources or want to connect with professionals dedicated to pediatric asthma care, please do visit omegapediatrics.com.
That's omegapediatrics.com. Definitely worth checking out.
It is. And if you found this conversation helpful today, please give the video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future discussions.
Yeah, subscribe.
And please share this video with anyone, friends, family, colleagues, who you think might benefit from this information. Thanks so much for joining us today on Have More Babies.
Goodbye, everyone. Take care.